Welcome to the Beau Leadership Group Podcast. This week, I thought we'd talk a little bit about Gucci. They're having some leadership changes at Gucci. I thought I'd have a little bit of Italian flair this week just for fun. Gucci is a fine luxury brand. Prada also might be one that comes to mind. The Wall Street Journal and other places are posting information about Gucci right now. They've had some CEO changes, like a lot of major conglomerates in the world right now. Leadership is about brand management. And there is almost no other brand like Gucci. Benvenuti, dear listeners. Welcome to the Beau Leadership Group Podcast, where we believe that everyone deserves to lead beautifully. Bellissimo. Speaking of beauty, let's us think of beautiful Italian landscapes. Perhaps you just had a great pasta, seafood dish, or a steak Florentine in Florence after seeing the statue of David. Picture this: the sun is setting over Florence, a warm breeze, Gucci bags at your feet, and your fine saddle leather loafers brought you onto the Ponte Vecchio, a Ferrari roaring in the distance, and La Dolce Vita. All of a sudden, a kind monk with a warm smile and the smell of peppermint sits down next to you and offers you a mint green tea and wants to tell you about Saint Benedict. Huh. The saint who saved morale? Imagine this. It's the year 500 AD. The Roman Empire has collapsed. Roads are crumbling under the aqueducts. Morale is shattered. And the only thing more broken than the buildings is the trust between the people. Corruption is everywhere. Sound familiar? Enter a young Italian named Benedict of Nursia. Now, Benedict wasn't a politician. He wasn't a soldier. He was a quiet man with a deep sense of purpose. But what he did changed the world and might just change how you lead your team today. He looked at chaos and said, "We're going to build something different." So he climbed the mountain, Monte Cassino, and he started a movement. He wrote leadership guidebooks called The Rule of Saint Benedict. It was only 73 short chapters, but it included radical ideas like listening more than speaking, delegating roles based on individual strengths, like the strengths you might find in a DISC methodology, giving people clear rules and enough rest. Today is Juneteenth. Hopefully you're having some rest today. Making sure everyone's voice, even the cooks or the cleaners, mattered. And get this, he called his leaders abbots, from the Aramaic word Abba, meaning father, but not a father who barks orders, a father who knows his people, their strengths, their struggles, their hearts. Today, Harvard Business Review calls this kind of leadership transformational. Saint Benedict just called it common sense. He started with 12 followers. Within 100 years, there were thousands. His rule outlasted kings, empires, even plagues. Why? Because he didn't lead with power. He led with purpose, peace, and presence. And maybe that's why our teams are starving right now. If you're leading people, whether it's a business, a nonprofit, or a busy household, remember Benedict's opening line: listen with the ear of your heart. Scripture tie-in, James 1:19, be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. Romans 12:10-11, honor one another above yourselves. Keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. These were some of the scriptural motivations for Benedict's morale improving systems. Today, we're talking about leadership, power, feedback, and mindset, but with an Italian twist. Because, amico, we're going full Tuscan sun with our leadership today. Italian luxury power that doesn't scream. Funny anecdote. Ever notice Italian stallions prancing around? Like on your Ferrari, perhaps? But in real life, the mares quietly run the herd. Very true. Same with power. Quiet influence beats loud dominance. A historical note: women have ruled the world many times and often. And they're often running things, even though they may not appear to be in public. But did you know Catherine de Medici? The Medicis, of course, from Florence, the original Italian queen. She ran France from the green room at Chenonceau Castle. Go to that castle if you ever get a chance. I've been there a couple times. She had true power, calm behind the scenes, feminine command. She coined the term green room, I believe. She ran things from a green room in Chamisot. She also ran things later from the Louvre. But a woman should be encouraging to lead people like Cleopatra and Catherine de' Medici. They've often run things and run things well. So in recent news in the Wall Street Journal, Leonard Lauder of Estee Lauder said women still buy luxury lipstick. Luxury, like with Prada and Gucci, are the kinds of things that people source, but maybe they aren't buying in times of uncertainty like today, a Rolls Royce or a full Gucci ensemble, but they still want to be pampered. And Leonard Lauder, he knew that women still buy lipstick because even in hard times, people deserve pampering. Like a Roman spa under the warm sun. And if you're Cleopatra, she pampered herself too and had a makeup regimen. They think Cleopatra and her folks crushed carmine beetles to get red lipstick. So it was a arduous task. But how you dress and make yourself up can make you appear more confident, more competent, attractive, and trustworthy. If you saw how Leonard Lauder dressed, for example, you would know what I mean. He had a flair, but it was well put together, timeless, like a dark pinstripe suit, white shirt. The tie matched the silk in his pocket. Rest in peace, my friend Leonard Lauder, the Navy veteran. He didn't have to probably serve, but he impacted merchandising in every department store. In 2016, Harvard did a study that showed moderate makeup worn by women made them appear more competent and likable. Some of my mentors suggest that I do makeup, and I haven't done any today, but I do think about it because if you have a little more color in your skin and you are videotaping yourself, you might look a little better, a little bit warmer. People might tune in more to you. Men and women need to know they're valued. Jamie Kern Lima wrote the book Worthy and spoke at Maxwell events and to other real estate events that I've been to. And I actually got to be just a few feet from her in a meeting in Orlando. And she makes you feel cared for. And in this episode, I want you to think about being a leader that cares, because leadership is about others, right? Everyone should read Jamie Kern Lima's book. It's called Worthy. My wife works for Washington State University right now, and Jamie Kern Lima went to WSU and was on the news in the Tri-Cities, Washington, before she made it big. Now she's made it big in the makeup industry because of her experience being on air. She wanted makeup to cover her, I believe it was rosacea. She lives next door to Oprah in Bel Air. So give yourself this feedback. You are worthy of luxury and Gucci brands, and so are your employees. Don't do anything stupid with your credit card, though, please. Buy that Ferrari used, or in my case, I have made 2 purchases from a Ferrari dealership. One of them was, in fact, a car, but the other one was just a sticker for my helmet. You know, the sticker was a much better deal. And if you want to buy Ferrari, buy their stock. Anyway, I think a little bit more about that great female leader, Catherine de' Medici, is in order, in part because I think it is important to realize that throughout history, women have had influence and been great leaders. Catherine de' Medici thrived way back in the 1500s and was born in Italy and ruled in France. So multi-country influence she had. She is a masterclass in subtle power, image-driven leadership. Remember, branding and image, your brand, your image, are very closely related. Gucci and Italian brands, a significant value to them is their image, right? And similar with even things like Coca-Cola, a big part of their market cap is their brand name. Catherine wasn't just a queen. She was a strategist, tastemaker, and behind-the-scenes architect of the modern European identity. She brought in all kinds of things to her leadership. She was born in the iconic Medici banking dynasty of Florence and married into the French monarchy. She was a queen, a regent, and the real power behind the throne for generations of kings. But Catherine didn't lead with a sword. She led with fashion, food, theater, and fear when necessary. Leadership through fashion Catherine understood the psychology of image long before Instagram. She introduced corsets, high heels, and Italian-style perfumes to the French court. These weren't just trends, they were tools of control, attention-getting. Her court's appearance set the standard for European royalty. How impactful is that? When you think back to European royalty, you can thank Catherine for reinforcing that power through elegance and exclusivity. When you control how people look, you shape how they behave. Catherine knew the appearance of power could become the reality of power. She even brought in ballet. Leadership through ballet, you ask? We have a speaker coming up for one of my leadership events who is famous for the Savannah Bananas. And they have a lot of dance that goes on in their baseball games. Unheard of not very long ago, but they basically brought in dance like Catherine brought in ballet. And Catherine is credited with introducing ballet to France. In 1581, she staged ballet, a lavish court performance that combined music and dance and storytelling with political symbolism. Ballet wasn't just an art, it was propaganda in motion. Royalty, grace, order, and beauty mirrored the monarch's idealized role in society. Catherine used this kind of culture to create coherence, to turn chaos into choreographed good stuff for leadership, right? That's next level leadership. Let's think about cuisine. She brought forks to France. Yes, really. Refined table manners and introduced Florentine cuisine from artichokes to spinach, which elevated dining from function to art. So that's pretty amazing, right? Think about how well-known France is for food now. Dining became a diplomatic tool where alliances were seasoned with olive oil and influence was plated with finesse. A good leader feeds the senses, not just the spreadsheets. And I think when we think about launches and different things, we should be looking at all the senses. She was looking at the olfactory senses with perfume. Music is another one that's good for the ears. Some of the best product launches that I've worked on, including one of the largest in the world, was working with the ad agency Wieden & Kennedy, and they got the Rolling Stones to do a launch with Microsoft. The Rolling Stones. It gets your attention. Think about strategic insight. The velvet glove of Catherine never forgot her Florentine roots. She was trained in Medici politics, where banking, art, and assassination sometimes overlap, but she used intelligence, marriage, religion, and spectacle to hold a fractured France together during the bloody wars of religion. Now, most religion is about peace, and I hope that we all remember that. I think of Iranian folks who are not part of the fascism and they're not part of the group that's angered Israel. Pray for them. But anyway, Catherine created alliances, married off her children strategically, and when needed, used fear. Yes, she was associated with Saint Bartholomew's Day massacre, a brutal moment in French history, but in her eyes, it was survival. Catherine believed that leadership wasn't about being liked, it was about preserving the crown with perhaps a bit of maybe perfume in the air. Catherine Medici taught us that power doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it glides across the ballroom and sits at the dinner table in velvet and shapes the future with a fan and a whisper. Let's boost our data like a Lamborghini. The Italians have a way of being with family and community that makes things better, like warm minestrone soup. Be like the minestrone soup when you give your employees a feedback, capiche? Anyway, here's why feedback matters. Really, listen up. Feedback matters. I have proof from Italiano universities and also Ivy League research. So the University of Naples, Federico, 2011, studied and found out volunteering, socializing, religious participation, social feedback loops are systematized ways that you give feedback regularly, and this can boost job satisfaction. And they studied this in Italy and found that it was true. Do you have feedback loops so your system works to give a sense of community? Be a good boy, Tony, and say something nice, would you? It would not kill you, Sophia, to say something nice too. Anyway, also, there is a study by the Italian Public Healthcare Sardinia University in 2018, and they found that high mental stress is inversely correlated with job satisfaction. So big mental stress, it's not a warm, inviting environment. You can have that stress, and that's going to be inversely correlated to job satisfaction, meaning high mental stress satisfaction goes down with your job. Not too shocking, right? But the way to resolve problems is equitable support and recognition that improves satisfaction. Another word for recognition is also feedback. They gave St. Peter a square. The least you can do is acknowledge your important employees before a mutiny, and they say a ciao to you for being a stupido. Harvard and other Ivy League studies show that positive feedback boosts performance. Negative feedback, no impact. I'm going to read that again because honestly, it is a bit surprising. Positive feedback boosts performance. Negative feedback, no impact. So you think you can do something aversive to make somebody change their behavior. No, it's not going to improve their performance. You need to catch them doing something good and give them positive feedback and see if you can get that success cycle going. So if you think you're giving gifts when you give negative feedback, think again, Giuseppe. Harvard programs emphasize empathy, trust building, active listening, and then all this is anchored in feedback for engagement. So having a system for feedback, critically important. Let's be a feeling the dolce vita anyway and engage with a feedback. It's not just a feedback when the timings matter too, Cosimo. So listen to me when I tell you, daily and midweek. Not Mondays. They're super busy, right? People don't have time. They may not hear you. But Tuesday to Thursday might be the window when you give good feedback. Brains are fresh in the mornings. Deadlines are distant. Leave ultimatums maybe for Fridays so an employee can consider it over the weekend. Give people time to think. Personalities, they differ. That's why we talk about DISC. People are different, right? If someone's grieving or just ran of the Italian festival all night, morning feedback might hurt. Respect that state of mind when you give feedback, not just the time of the week. Did they come in late one day because they just had their first baby and are exhausted? Give them a break. Frequency and quality. Regular, non-surprising feedback beats annual reviews. My wife had a successful job at Nike. And in fact, she's an expert equipper. And she didn't know when she went to Thailand and got me these cuff links for my beautiful outfit today that she was equipping me. But remember, we talk about clear, CLEAR, communication, leadership. E is equipping others. She equipped me for this podcast and didn't even know it back then, but she equips the family. She's critically important to that in her leadership role in our family. And she has a great attitude, the A in clear, and she's stupendous in the relationship building part of leadership as well. People like to be around her a lot. Anyway, she had to manage factories and timelines and shipments and quality and the annual reviews, and these things added stress. And one of the things that made her leave Nike is stress. In one case, she got a bad review from a mean European manager, which impacted where she could work in the near term. And the company was honoring this guy's opinion. He happened to say something right when it impacted where she might get to have job satisfaction or not. In this case, with her annual review, it did not take into account all that was going on, and it was given too big an influence on her career path, in my humble opinion. Some personalities, like DISC S-type people, guard feedback because things related to their safety and livelihood is personal. They may respond passive-aggressively if caught off guard. And this is important because, as we've talked about in previous episodes, Gallup finds that about 1 in 5 employees, 20%, are actively disengaged. Active disengaged is harming your company, right? Feedback is your chance to connect and maybe counter this a little bit, but not if you get people when they're not ready for it. Get to them before they say, arrivederci, and permanently do some damage. Anyway, valuable questions to keep the warm vibe of a candlelight dinner with your favorite pizza. Studies show that feedback and annual reviews often fail to help employees. Make your feedback sessions warm and uplifting. Try to frame your feedback like focus group in a Florentine piazza. Say something nice, Guido. I really do mean that. You should say, no promises, and then ask for the person's dreams. Get to know them. If you don't know what motivates your employees, you're not leading. So think about this. Start out. No promises, of course, but if I had a magic bottle with a genie in it and they could grant your wish, what's one thing I could do? Question one. What's one thing I could do to make the biggest difference here with you? Then ask question two. What's one thing you could do to make a difference at our organization? Maybe they have the brainstorm of the century. Maybe they've determined how to put the rubber cement on the back of the 3M Post-it note. That's the one that people seem to talk about a lot. That was a mistake, right? They came up with a glue that didn't quite work really well. So wait a minute, we stick this to paper and we have a whole industry. Question three. When did you last feel most alive at work? Or some similar wording of this question. The idea is, again, to understand what motivates them. And then what's the worst drag you've ever felt here? Sometimes your top performers need somebody to help them with some simple task like invoices. If you have a multi-million-dollar salesperson and they're spending 20% of their week in invoice paperwork and they're not very good about it because they're not the detail-oriented type, they're the relationship-building type, then find somebody to do that task at a lower wage and get that top performer out where they can create the most marginal revenue. So question four was, what's the worst drag that you've ever felt here? 5, are you sacrificing any personal dreams to stay here? UPS was one of the famous ones in my mind that had a system where they allowed Olympic athletes to work for them and they gave them time off for when they needed to compete. So they were able to achieve their personal dreams and stay. Question 6, after this role, what do you really want to do? That's another way of getting an idea of what their direction in life is. And maybe they haven't thought about it, and maybe you can help them and mentor them and be a relationship builder and connector to other people that might want to do what they want to do, or help them with ideas. You've been there, done that. Question 7, would you recommend this job and why? So this is a little twist on what Bain and Company does in the marketplace when they're doing mergers and acquisitions. They ask, would you recommend this company of customers to get an idea of how solid the pipeline is for a company? In the realm of a review, would you recommend this job and why? Understand why they would and would not recommend the job. That way you might get an idea of what type of personality is right for the position. What percent of the time do you feel dissatisfied and why? That's question 8. 9, conversely, what percent do you enjoy? What aspects rank in your top 1 to 3 of things you really like to do? So these are questions that are critically important to understand what people want to do. And remember that we've talked about before in previous episodes that ADP has done research and it has determined that, it is a job. So you're not going to be happy all the time. And I had a manager that was like, yeah, of course you're dissatisfied with this. That's why we're paying you. And that's not warm and friendly. And that person, coincidentally, a nice word for them is jerk. They didn't do well with people, and they knew they didn't do well with people, and they shouldn't be doing reviews and things, but they were in a role where they were training people and they had interactions with people. And at times they would say that very thing. That's what we're paying you for. Payment is only one motivation, and it's not the only one. And you need to find out what are the aspects that a person ranks in their top 1 to 3. Sometimes it's data entry. I have had employees that loved data entry. They would rather do that than anything else because they can sit down, they can do that data entry, and they know that they can leave at 5 p.m. and go home and start over the next day, and they know what they're doing. They're doing data entry. It can vary greatly by employee. And then finally, question 10, what's the best thing about working here? What lights your fire? The answers to these questions uncover mindset, not just performance, and things that you can work on, and hopefully tools to engage and keep your key people motivated. motivate. Did you know that interest charges were invented in ancient Mesopotamia 4,000 years ago? Honestly, I had to look that up. I did think it was actually started in Italy, but turns out that Italians refined it into an institutional bank, in part to create interest bearing lending. And that actually fueled the Renaissance. Avoid too much interest and too much debt, and don't buy your Gucci on contract. Pay cash, buy things used. Anyway, with finance, sometimes you can get better innovation, just like a Ferrari V12. If you don't have good fuel in it, you want to fuel it. Sometimes we can fuel a business with sales much better than we can with finance, because when the sales go down, you can get stuck. Anyway, treat employees like luxury assets. Give them autonomy, social support, and recognition, like a spa day for morale. And like most leadership principles, this could apply to your relationships elsewhere with your kids or your spouse. I want to talk a little bit about those times when an employee situation is going bad. 20 years ago, when I was studying leadership and organizational behavior formally, one of the concepts was called the FedEx method. And it was supposedly developed by FedEx at their Tennessee headquarters for middle and lower employees. And I'm not recommending ultimatums for the C-suite here. Most don't understand why a CEO gets paid what they do and why they are worth the money. But most CEOs would not respond well to an ultimatum. Trust me. All employees are valuable and especially expensive to replace, because it not only costs you that employee, but it costs you the relationships, the cost of hiring another employee, and then training that employee up to their levels and standards that are needed for that role. So losing an employee can be a real love loss and a karmic hit all at once. So rather than just firing people when they didn't perform, FedEx changed their approach and found that 90% of cases were able to be turned around when they talked to that person on a Friday afternoon and said, your behavior is not up to par and we need you to bring it up to par. And here's what you need to do. And I don't want you to answer me whether you can do these changes. I want you to go think about it over the weekend. And Monday, tell me what you've decided if you want to continue working here and can be fully all in to meet the high standards. In short, at the end of the week, say, think it over. Monday, let's talk. People often return recommitted after the weekend. It's amazing, right? But be ready. They may not want to come back Monday. But in the case of FedEx, 90% of the time they did want to come back. And in the case of FedEx, they substantially reduced HR and training costs. You saved 90%. That's a lot of training and employee hiring and ads and interviewing and HR personnel. Switching now to my favorite topic, DISC. DISC yourself into the Dolce Vita. Good supervision can boost productivity 20%. Supervision cost about 15%. So that's a 5% plus, right? If supervision boosts productivity 20% and costs 15%, then your value comes right out of that supervision. Trained supervisors can pay for themselves. And you can use DISC or Myers-Briggs or your favorite personality assessment to help with your feedback. And DISC is easy and relatable, and that's why I think it's a great tool to use, and it makes each employee feel seen. It's like a Maserati, and you know which gear they are in and how to shift their manual transmission. Each person has a Pininfarina beautiful design. St. Benedict and DISC may seem like unlikely companions. One is a 6th century saint, the other a modern behavioral tool, but they both champion the same timeless leadership truth. You lead best when you understand who you're leading. Here's how you can tie in DISC into a St. Benedict's-like philosophy in a compelling and relevant way for your organization, church, or family. If you think about it, St. Benedict invented DISC before DISC. Now, I know what you're thinking. St. Benedict didn't have a laptop. He didn't have a personality chart, and he couldn't do DISC assessments in 7 minutes like we can today. Yes, it's that easy. You can do a DISC assessment in 7 minutes for each employee, your DISC profile. And when I do it, I'll send you a 30-page document all about you from that 7-minute assessment and the environments that would be best for you. St. Benedict came in Italian life so early, they didn't even have espresso yet. But he did something brilliant. He studied people deeply. like a leadership scientist in a robe. And if you've ever used the DISC model, you know it breaks down human behavior into 4 easy to manage types. D, dominance, those are the decisive, competitive people. I, influence, those are the talkative, enthusiastic people. S, steadiness, loyal, dependable. That's 70% of your workforce if you hire general population folks. But if you're hiring accountants, they might be more like the last category. C, conscientious, detail oriented, precise. Guess what? Benedict was working with these types too. In the Rule of St. Benedict, he talks about assigning tasks based on temperament, giving extra patience to the quiet and anxious monks, encouraging the overly confident ones to practice humility, making sure everyone, even the slowest monk, had a meaningful role. Does this sound familiar? That's classic DISC in action. Let's break down the 4 DISC types a little bit further. D type, dominant, the monks who wanted to lead everything. Benedict didn't squash them. He gave them structure and accountability. He put clear limits around their authority, reminding abbots to act as if they are shepherds, not tyrants. That's leadership maturity. And if you look at Proverbs 16:32, better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control, than one who takes a city. So going to the I type, the influencers, these monks probably wanted to chat during vows of silence. Benedict created time for joy and brotherhood, but he also protected quiet reflection. He knew some people restore their morale and stillness, like INFJs. Many introverts need that quietness. Folks need stillness. And Ecclesiastes 3:7 says, there's a time to keep silence and a time to speak. S, the S type, steady supporters. Again, 70% of the population at large. Benedict loved these folks. He called them and used them for stability, community, and respect. All things S types thrive on, right? But he also warned against passive resistance, exactly what S types can fall into when not supported properly. This reminds me of Galatians 6:9. Let us not grow weary in doing good. Because the S type is steady and they want to do good, but they can grow weary of it, especially if you're giving them negative feedback. Remember, negative feedback does not improve things. And become passive aggressive. If you have employees becoming passive aggressive, that means they're doing things behind your back, right? So passive aggressive is the term psychologists use to label some donkeys, if you know what I mean. Anyway, C, conscientious. These are the rule followers, and for rule followers and those checklist lovers, Benedict was their guy. He created the first systematic operations manual for communal life, a monk manual, but he warned against being rigid or overly critical. C types can get stuck in perfectionisms and have trouble getting out of that perfectionism. Matthew 23:23 shows us it's not just about laws and rules when it says, you neglect the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. And I would add into that heart as well. The warm thing that the Italians do so well is heart. So the modern tie-in, what's the takeaway? Amici. St. Benedict taught this long before this came in a chart. People aren't problems. They're patterns. Learn people's patterns and you can lead with peace instead of pressure. Your D type needs challenges. Your I type needs recognition. Your S types need reassurance. Your C types need clarity. St. Benedict gave all 4 types exactly what they needed with grace, rhythm, and purpose. That's why his leadership model still works today. So question for you, which DISC type are you? And what do you think your employees are? And who on your team is your opposite? What would Benedict say about how you manage that relationship? Go to beauleadershipgroup.com and contact us and learn what your DISC team types are. So let's recap what we talked about in terms of power, pampering, luxury, and performance. Quiet authority like Catherine Medici or stallions versus mares. You can rule with grace, ballet, and perhaps high heels and perfume too. And Cleopatra purported to use red lipstick. Feedback equals fuel. There are lots and lots of research on this. Research from Naples, Italy to Harvard, Mass. We thrive on positive, not negative feedback. Time it right, that feedback, midweek and mornings, unless life throws you an Italian festival or an employee is in a tough spot. Give them a little time and space. You don't want to lose them and have that cost that we talked about of replacing the employee. Ask big questions of your people and tap into their passions before workers tap out. And balance finances and favors. Not too much interest, plenty of nurturing and pampering. Ultimatums with dignity, weekend reflections so that people can re-engage. And then you avoid the cost of having to replace that person when they do re-engage. Be prepared. They may not. Know your Italian luxury drivers. A well-fed team works like a Ferrari. So questions for you. Lavish praise or quiet compliment? Which resonates with you? Morning feedback or afternoon pep talk? What hits better with you? Tell us your successes. And as we sign off, Viva la dolce vita. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you love this vibe. Subscribe and share Beau Leadership Group. We believe that everybody should be deserving of leading beautifully. Can you increase your influence and make a difference with your feedback? Yes, you can. Be graceful and act like Catherine Medici.